We have three panel members here today. One was unable to make the connections, and he'll be joining us virtually. Please. So good afternoon, everyone. Honorable representatives of the government of Botswana, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be able to facilitate this session today. We're seeking to explore over the next 30 or 40 minutes information on issues that impact tourism broadly outside of Botswana, but also issues of interest to investment in Botswana. And we're going to do this with a diverse panel. We have a serial entrepreneur and regional investor. That's Hamza Faruqi. He's based in South Africa, and he's joining us virtually. To complement his perspective, we have a domestic investor in Mr. Kim Nixon, sitting on the end, with Choba Holdings. Oh, and I should say that Hamza Faruqi leads Millet Investments. We have a multilateral development partner in the European Union, Ambassador Petra. And we also have a multilateral investment bank representative in Sam Ganga from the IFC, a manager there. While we have a diverse group of people, we have something in common. We all believe in the vision and the interest to advance tourism investment, both globally and in Botswana. So let's begin with Mr. Hamza. Are you there? You are. Good to see you. Maybe you could give us about 2 minutes on how Millet has engaged in tourism investment generally. And then I understand that you're in South Africa, you're interested in regional investment, but you have not invested yet in Botswana. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that. Thank you, Hamza.
Thank you very much, and very happy to share my perspectives, Hans, on those items. I apologize for not being able to be there myself. I had a very tight missed connection this morning, but I'm here nonetheless for a very important topic and something which I think I'm hoping that the government of Botswana will take into account and take the feedback in, because I think really the time in our industry is at such a place where it's now time for execution. It's now time for regional understanding. I think the days of looking at the African and the SADC countries in silos, South Africa on one side, Botswana on one side, I think is over. I think if we are generally going to build a tourism platform and we're really going to build a thesis, there has to be a regional reach and there has to be a regional positioning. So I'm really pleased that this event is taking place. But I'm also very pleased with the type of people who are at this event, and specifically the IFC, because I think there's an important opportunity and issue which needs to be addressed. And that's around how do I really de-risk this sector? Because one of the biggest challenges we all face is how do you build scale and how do you actually make this tourism industry appetizing enough in our parts of the world, because capital is a major issue. The banks don't like hotels and tourism assets. They don't like the lumpiness. They don't like the execution risk. And how does organizations like the IFC offer real sector support enhancement? We know what the impact of the industry is. We know what, if Botswana gets the tourism story right, what it's going to do for its GDP, what it's going to do. Our challenge is we all know what the problem is. No one is able to actually get across the execution line. So I'm really hoping that the outcome of today is going to be execution. How do you start making robust and real changes? Because that's a challenge we face. There is limited execution. We know what the problem is. And I think that starts with organizations like the IFC actually saying, how do we start getting and making significant structural changes? Where are the banks facing the bottlenecks? How do we de-risk them? How do we provide a framework where more capital flows? And then I think for governments like Botswana is, how do we pick the right winners? How do we make the best advantage of our destination, authenticity, all that Africa has to offer? How do I use the regional framework and how do I build that? So I think today, for me, these are some of the issues which need to be unpacked, because I think we have a huge opportunity, but timing is running out. There's lots of parts in the world who are chasing the tourism dollars and they will arrive. Africa has to act now, and it's now time for that action. So I'm hoping that's going to be an outcome which you and your panelists and the delegates generally will find a solution for. And I'm hoping that this event is a platform towards driving that.
Thank you, Hamza. I think that you're facilitating for me. Sam, I think that this is a cry to IFC for some response, but also, Ambassador, I think that the EU, being a multilateral partner, prioritizing jobs, tourism, economic development, also may have something to say on this. So first, let's go to Sam and ask if you have any response to this, but also, Sam, maybe a couple of minutes on what IFC does in investment to help develop the investment sector.
Thanks. So Hamza kind of put me on the spot.
He sure has.
He was very specific about where he was targeting his question. So I'm very glad to be here, and I really enjoyed the discussions this morning. Because we can start at step 2, right? Sometimes we go into some of these discussions and we are all not sure that, the country situation is an attractive investment destination, or that there is an interest in attracting investors. I think from this morning, we can sort of assume that is not the case in this instance. And to Hamza's point, the good thing about doing this in Botswana is a lot of the issues that come up when we talk about Africa risk, really, Botswana is already ahead, right? So you don't have the governance issues. I think the session that just went up in front of us really addressed a lot of those issues. Which brings us to the next step, right? So investment is not investment flows go into specific investment projects, right? And so when we say we want to attract investment, what are we going to be invested in? And what IFC does, IFC is a very large investor in tourism sector around the world. Our regional director mentioned that this morning. We've almost $1 billion of investment already out. And where we have focused on in that value chain has primarily been in hotels and other bits of the infrastructure for the reasons that were mentioned a few minutes ago. We are both about ensuring commercial sustainability, but we're also about development impact and the impact of the hotel sector, especially on creating jobs during the development phase and on an ongoing basis after that, is very high. So we particularly like that. We've also recently, as some of these facilities, some of them are older, we've been working with all the various developers and operators in terms of greening those hotels and making sure that they are EDGE certified. And so there's lots of opportunities right along the value chain. So what is the response to Hamza's question? So my title, if you see my title, it says Upstream and Advisory Manager. And Hans had asked me, what is an upstream manager? So let me use that opportunity to answer that question. There is a lot of capital available in the world. There is not a lot of ready projects for investment. We have to work together with the private sector to actually develop an idea into an actual project that IFC can invest in and partners are willing to put their time and money into. So an upstream manager works with the sector in, if we have investors, if we have entrepreneurs who are considering making an investment, but you need to work alongside somebody who can help you define the parameters that will make it possible to invest. Then that's what we do as upstream. And then later, we also have capital, and so we will come alongside you to deploy the capital. And everything that happens from pre-feasibility to feasibility to the actual deployment of capital, that is what upstream is about. And so we are very keen, and the reason we came here is we are very keen to find partners who we can work with to develop these opportunities now that the macro issues are being addressed. And then we can find ways to attract capital into very specific projects. Let me stop there, but happy to expand on it as we go.
I was going to ask, before we move to Ambassador, as IFC has finished this diagnostic with the World Bank of tourism, from the investment perspective, do you have 2 or 3 issues that were raised there that you particularly value as important to address to help unlock the sector to investment?
So the document that you're referring to, I think, which is our country private sector diagnostic, is a document that I would really encourage everybody to read. It's, I think, published, Hans, because we spent a lot of time with the government counterparts, with other stakeholders in the sector, doing that analysis. And the analysis is done, and it's now time for action. But many of the issues that were mentioned earlier this morning, right? You have an amazing country with a lot of attractive opportunities, but there may be a need to enhance the level of destination marketing, right? So that there is an awareness of this. We also spent a lot of time this morning talking about connectivity, right? People have to be able to get here effectively. I think if you segment the tourist sector, I think Botswana has got the luxury sector very well served, but there are other sectors like ecotourism that there's opportunities to develop, and all of that. So I think there's areas that we can work on, and we've tried to address that in that document. And then a number of the areas that our regional director had mentioned this morning around making sure that we are supporting the ability for the investors to access the right skills that they need, the tourist arrivals to have less difficulties around visas. So all the various issues that are mentioned in that document, that would really help make the destination really attractive so that the investors have an opportunity to access a market that is has high potential.
Hamza has challenged us with a call to action. Ambassador, maybe you could talk a little bit about your office and how you are engaging in tourism support.
Thank you, sir. Yes, it's working.
Yes.
Very good. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here because to discuss tourism value chains and what European Union can do. Obviously, as an international partner and as also an international donor, we are there to work in close partnership with Botswana government, but also with SADC, the Southern African Development Community, vis-à-vis the organization. I'm also the ambassador, and we have very substantial partnership and portfolio ongoing. So we are there to support the creation of a business environment. We cannot, as an international diplomatic mission or an international donor, to be supporting private sector as such, but we are there to support Botswana's ambition, for instance, on transforming its economy, diversifying the economy, creating jobs, and moving away from natural-based resource economy, the diamonds, to more diversified economy. And obviously, tourism is a hugely important sector, given it's already the second biggest sector, and there's great potential to develop that sector further and the value chains in ecotourism in Botswana, but also in the SADC region more globally. We are there to support development of value chains. We have been there already engaged since many decades on the skills development. Skills is a big area where we know there are big gaps in Botswana, including in the tourism sector, and we have been supporting skills development in different sectors in Botswana since many decades already, and we continue to do so also in the future. We are also, part of our offer now for the years to come will be what we call the Global Gateway. So it's the European Union new strategy of creating strategic connectivity within African continent in terms of transport connectivity, energy connectivity, digital connectivity. All of these will also contribute to that, creating that enabling environment for private business to thrive, for better connectivity, for access to new areas. So this doesn't only mean infrastructure, hard infrastructure. It will be also hard infrastructure, but it will also be soft measures such as harmonization of regulation, etc., which will be absolutely essential, and which is already something that we are working on together with our partners such as Botswana bilaterally, but also in our programs when we work with SADC at the regional level. De-risking is another area where the international partners such as European Union can contribute, and part of this whole global gateway strategy that we now have introduced, which is our main offer and our main strategy for Africa and beyond, is really to bring on board the private sector. Private sector is at the heart of this strategy. and private sector, private investment institutions, international financing institutions are at the heart of this strategy, and we need everybody on board, from us as European Union, but also our member states, as well as the investors, international investors. This is something from the European Union side. This is a long-term investment, and this is a long-term engagement and partnership we have with countries like Botswana. We have been active and present in the country since 1980s with our office here, and our partnership has evolved as the country has evolved and transformed to the country it is today, and we are there to work in close partnership with the government and also other stakeholders, investment banks, and also with the private sector to hear you and see how we can contribute to creating of that conducive environment for ecotourism sector to thrive.
Many of the people in the room are businessmen and women who have invested or are interested to invest here. If your programs are successful, maybe looking 5 years future, what would you say may make a difference? How would the people here maybe see things a little differently in the sector? Or at least what would you like to see?
What I would like to see, as I say, these are long-term investments. We are already working here in Botswana we have program, for instance, for job creation and investment climate, where we are specifically investing in tourism, ecotourism value chain. We are also working on with our partners on supporting local communities and areas where there is also great opportunities for tourism in terms of wildlife management and reconciliation of wildlife management with the local livelihoods and cattle herding and so forth. We will also have besides these global gateway transit corridors, there will be 2 corridors that will be running through Botswana. There are 12 corridors on the African continent in total. 3 of them will be crossing Southern Africa, and 2 of them will be physically present here in Botswana. So I hope those, again, these are long-term investments, but I hope those will be, those corridors, strategic corridors will help create better connectivity, better access to certain areas, better sustainability of transport and energy connectivity in the region, and including here in Botswana. We will also have another program which will be we are now finalizing and hope to be launching very soon, say beginning of next year, which is called Natur Africa. It's a very substantial program where we'll be investing about over 30 million euros to trans-frontier conservation areas, including in Kasa and also Kalakadi in the southern Botswana, which is essentially about reconciling and investing in livelihoods of the local communities, while at the same time creating, conserving the biodiversity and the ecosystems in the trans-frontier conservation areas. So I believe these programs are should be fully in the interest also of the tourism sector, and creating this, showcasing how you can reconcile the livelihoods of the local communities, how you can create jobs, how you can fight poverty, inequalities in Botswana, while at the same time preserving the fantastic nature and the biodiversity that Botswana has, and which is really at the heart of the tourism as well. I mean, this is the reason why people come here and want to see, and this is essential that we make every effort we can to make tourism sustainable, green, and also good for the local communities. So it's a win-win for both.
Thank you. Kim, you've heard this call to action. Well, firstly, let me just say, I don't think that I've done justice to introducing you. Maybe you could share a little bit about the breadth of Chobe Holdings and some of what you're involved in to give the audience some better understanding. But you've heard Hamza with this call to action. You've heard representatives of development partners that are really working hard to work with both the public sector and the private sector to pull in investment. But you are an investor. You have been here working in this environment for a long time. Maybe you could share some of your lessons learned and maybe some next steps you'd like to see if you had a wish list going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Just as an introduction to Chobe Holdings, the company is nearly 40 years old now. They began up in the very north of the country on the Chobe River with the ownership of Chobe Game Lodge. which is nearing in on 50 years now, so one of the very earliest entrants into the tourism sector. Over the years, the business has grown and incorporated sub-brands, namely Kurundani, Botswana, as well as Desert and Delta Safaris. Today, we operate 14 lodges with more than 330 beds and employ around about 800 citizens, 98% of them citizens. Over the years, and since we began when the industry was in its infancy, we are and we're forced to become vertically integrated and therefore also have our own aircraft, a combination of Cessna Grand Caravans as well as air vans. And we also have an air maintenance organization which takes care of the maintenance of the aircraft itself. Suffice it to say that we have spent many years investing in the local economy and building a brand that provides a circuit of experiences for guests, which are extremely diverse, easily linked, and provide superb wildlife experiences. I think the first thing that I would like to say is that Botswana is a country that does deserve a lot of accolades. They have got an enormous amount of land set aside for nature conservation, nearly 40% of the country, and it's a country the size of France, and that's worthy of a lot of praise. And they do have some wonderful policies which encourage investment, whether it is a local investor or whether it is a foreign investor. However, policy doesn't mean much unless it is backed up with action. And I think that the very first thing that I would recommend as a local investor is that there could be stronger and more effective engagement between private sector and the public sector, such that it allows for the expertise from the private sector to be shared with the public sector, and for information from the other side to come to us that would help to guide policy which could then be implemented to greater benefit of all. I think when it comes to the next step then, it would be to re-embrace international marketing, destination marketing of the country that truly gives justice to the diversity of experiences that are in the country itself. So the reintroduction of representation at key source markets that represents the sector and the experiences and the operators in the sector is crucial, as well as then effectively managing the media, PR, and the influencer space. It's vital that from a marketing point of view, the destination is marketed primarily by the government, which is then backed up by private sector. Then onto the local government side of things, and I wanted to just bring attention back to the investment side of things. For an investor to invest, they need security of tenure. And so there's been a lot of mention this morning about the leases and the issuance of the leases or the reissuance of long outstanding leases. This is something that government is paying attention to, and we believe that it will be dealt with in due course, but it is a very crucial point to note that investors will not invest unless they have security of land. When you get a lease in the tourism sector in northern Botswana where we operate, it's not as simple as just being able to build a lodge. And I do want to make the point clear to any potential investor that there are many obligations that need to be fulfilled before you're allowed to even open your doors. And those obligations can take quite a lot of time. In fact, if you get a new lease, it can take you upward of 2 years to 3 years before you actually are able to open and operate. And so if there was a third thing that I would suggest, it would be that the regulatory framework and the bureaucracy at a local government level could become more efficient, support policy of higher levels of government, and enact what it is that we're seeking to so that we can ensure this investment flows. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. I guess on that last point, I would say that might be a call to Minister Filda that, with this, in this particular sector of investment, the ability to not only secure the land but begin to work on it in less than 24 or 36 months would be an objective that would be tangible and measurable, and I think, as you're suggesting, Kim, highly beneficial to attracting additional investment into Botswana. Kim, I wanted to stay with you for 1 minute and ask, if you look at the sector broadly, where do you think the opportunity is, the best opportunity for new investment? If you were to start again, or at least in the space, moving away from the space that you're at currently, where would you go? What would you be looking to explore?
I think that, the Botswana Tourism Organization and the Ministry of Environment have some really interesting ideas and policies and thoughts, and they revolve around cultural tourism, anthropological tourism, and also development of previously ignored areas such as the Kalahari Desert, for example. You've got this massive reserve in the central Kalahari of 52,000 square kilometers, and there's only one operating lodge in it. So if I were to look at opportunities, I would look on the fringes of the high-value tourism as it stands right now, the western side of the Okavango Delta, the cultural tourism, the rich cultural tourism that exists in the area of Sorongo, which is on the northern fringes of the Delta, up to the Gudigwa villages. There's a lot of opportunity up there. And then also down into the desert. And the last point that I would want to add is that there is an enormous opportunity, what I call a dripping roast, which is Tsadilo Hills. It is a World Heritage Site with Bushman paintings and Bantu paintings that date back nearly 3,000 years. It's a mesmerizing experience, and it's the Louvre of the desert. So all of these opportunities still exist, which in my mind, many of which are still high-value opportunities. And if movement could happen such that people could tender for opportunities and be able to enter and operate, I think that they could very easily be profitable ventures.
Thank you. Hamza, I know you've been listening patiently. Since you've sort of kicked off the spirit of the discussion, I wonder if you have any reflections on what you're hearing. And then I wanted to ask if there are any lessons learned from your experience as an entrepreneur and investing in the tourism sector that you think we could apply to Botswana?
So I'm going to answer the question in sort of two ways. One is, I think the conversation is great. I think the items which have been spoken about are great. I would really love to see organizations, though, like the IFC and the EU representative mission, really play a much more lead role. Putting together a sector diagnostics is, I think, one thing, but I think where Africa really needs the sort of guidance and the support is for these institutions to provide significant comfort, de-risk, whether that's within the local financing community, whether that's in the form of, credit instruments, whether that's in the form of simply saying, listen, these are the top 3, 4, 5 tourism projects. We sort of support them because it's, that's going to make the entire ecosystem more bankable. That's going to make the interest in global brands, very, very appealing. One of the theses we have is that for any destination to drive presence and to really support the destination marketing, the brands do have a very important role to play. They have a very, very strong following around loyalty. They have a very strong capability to drive credibility and to bring that quality traffic, which lifts that entire destination. In Africa, that's been something which has been probably missing because everything is greenfield, it takes time. The issue of bureaucracy and what's been spoken of, the fact that you have to wait 3 years before a lease, that puts not just the investor off, but will put any global brand off. So my view is, I think if I have to take the thread from the 3 speakers, what's the action point? And I think that's for something for Botswana as a regional hub of excellence to figure out what can these organizations do and what do they need to do and how do they do it meaningfully, thoughtfully, and efficiently. And I think there's huge opportunity. My colleague at Chobe will tell you they've got some great product, great experiences. But how do you build that? How do you create that ecosystem resourcefully? And how do you create that with the bureaucracy out? And how do you get that done? And then how do you also de-risk some of the perceptual issues which the sector has faced from a financing standpoint? So I think if there is an outcome to that, it's probably a call to action on the government side. Private sector will follow. I can say from a millet side, if there's a right opportunity which presents itself, we will come to Botswana. However, we're not going to wait 3 years for a lease because no brand is going to support us. And that's going to be an expensive cost of capital exercise. So they have to curate, I think, the offering, and they have to solve for some of these things before serious capital comes. I think from a learning standpoint, for me, there's probably two things. One is, if you are going to be in this sector, you have to understand in tourism, it's about the customer. We're in business not because we need to make lots of money, but it's about the customer. So it's having a huge degree of customer centricity. One of the things I think being an African is we have got inherent skill sets around people skills, people. If you give them the right training, I think we can create some great customer-centric destinations. And then the second part is focus. And I would urge the government again, instead of simply just looking at 50 projects, find 2 or 3 real projects, real opportunities, mobilize resources and focus. Because what tends to happen is you tend to do too much and you don't get across the finish line. So those are probably my 2 sort of takeaways I would leave these sort of organizers, the government, and the various stakeholders with.
To bring this session to a close, I wanted to have another question for you, Hamza, and another for IFC, and then I would like to ask each of you for a final word. What message would you like to leave the audience? What brief message before we close? Hamza, I'm looking at the video and your splash screen behind you, and I see the Hyatt brand. And in the room this morning, we spoke a great deal about marketing and marketing for Botswana. How important is a marketing initiative and large brand, international brand names like Hyatt? And if you could be brief with your reply, appreciate it.
So my view is crucially important. And I said this earlier, if you are going to build credibility, having the brand presence is very important. It de-risks the market, allows you to fetch yield, and really create that destination presence. So I believe it's very, very important.
Sam, people know that IFC is an investor in this space, and there are many people, I think, here interested in finding investment. Can you briefly explain what is a attractive investment? What terms are we looking for? Who would we be consider partnering with in the investment process?
Thanks, Hans. So just to be brief on this, the most important thing we're looking for is, first of all, the partner that we're going to invest in. Because one of the things that IFC differentiates ourselves on the basis of is that we're a long-term investor. So we're going to be doing business together for 7, 8, 9, 10 years, right? So the selection of the partner that we're going to work with is really key, and that needs to be somebody who's very well committed to the market and the business that they're going to be in. So it was interesting to hear how many years you've been in Botswana. We hope there are other partners that are really going to put in that kind of time, because we are patient capital, right? So the single most important thing is we want to find a reliable, ethical partner that we can work with. And we are aware that we're going to go through a lot of challenges. We had a lot of hotel investments during COVID. We stuck with all of them, and we found resolution to the issues that came up. And now many of them are recovering. So that's sort of issue number 1. I think issue number 2 is then what is the project, and I think we have to be completely transparent. We insist that we invest in commercially sustainable operations, right? This is an investment, it is not a grant, and therefore we will be very careful, and we will spend a lot of time looking at the economics of the transaction, making sure that the business works. And if it doesn't initially work, we'll work together and see if there are things we can do in terms of changing it to make it bankable and investable. And then we will work together also to attract other capital. But we're a long-term investor, and I think, as you mentioned, in the tourism industry, this is really important because you may be a period there where you're spending, and there is no money coming through the door. So, how do you structure that transaction so that you reflect the reality of the industry, right? And the tourism industry, that is the nature of it. Now, the instruments that we should use, and Hamza mentioned, credit, various instruments we might use to address the risks. We have a full range of instruments running from straight loans to equity to a variety of other instruments. We will partner and find what the appropriate opportunity is. And finally, IFC is not just an investment house. We are not just about money. We have entire teams that work on advisory services and technical assistance to help you with everything else that comes along with investing in this area. Environmental and social sustainability issues. Now climate change is an important thing, and I saw yesterday there was a heat wave in this region. This is real, right? Mm-hmm. And so as you build an investment, you need to be designing for that. So IFC, in a nutshell, is we're a long-term partner. We have capital, but we have more than capital, and we'll work together to build a project that makes sense for the country. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. So final words now. We'll start with you, Ambassador.
Thank you so much. Maybe just first to react on
Please,
some of the things that have been said by the earlier speakers, including, so from the European Union side, we are really investing heavily in the economic diversification and value chains in Botswana, but also regionally. And we are already supporting many of the reforms, including doing business reforms here in Botswana, where we both do needs analysis, we do capacity building. We are also working on this one-stop service center for actors in the tourism sector. So this is really something that we're already investing in, and we hope that will bear fruit for that you will see in making it easier for doing business in this area. So I really hope that these programs that we have in place here in Botswana and also in the SADC region, including the Global Gateway, will help attract investment, create jobs, and creating a conducive business environment also for the tourism sector. For us, it's very important to engage with the private sector. And we, for instance, earlier in June, we went up north to Maun with the EU ambassadors. We organized a visit where we visited EU-funded programs exactly to see how you can coexist with wildlife in these remote areas, but also to engage with private sector actors, including in the tourism sector, to understand what are the challenges and difficulties they have and how we can then see that our programs are fit for purpose and they deliver the results that we want to see. We also organized what we call European Union Botswana Business Forum last month in October, which was also an opportunity for European and Botswana, as well as Southern African businesses and private sector and investors, potential investors, to engage and see what are the value chains that they can develop. So these are, and also these events such as this one is very important for us to hear it from the private sector, engage with you and make sure that our programs deliver and are fit for purpose in these areas of economic diversification and job creation. Thank you.
Thank you. Sam?
So we've said a lot, we're going to say a lot, but at the end of the day, we are very committed as IFC to Botswana. We recently established a representative here, and I think Nuzat is somewhere in the audience. So we want to hear from the entrepreneurs that are looking for investment opportunities. We are also actively working with the various players to develop and identify those opportunities. So please talk to us, right? We really want to find opportunities to support this country, and we are keen and we are ready, and we will be very interested in having that discussion. So looking forward to it.
Thank you, Sam. Kim?
Botswana is a phenomenal country. She has a wealth of resources, and there are a myriad of really wonderful opportunities to potentially invest in the tourism space. My recommendation is to make sure that you work closely with the authorities as well as with the citizens, and partnerships is definitely a developing side of the sector, to make sure that you have the right people in the team that you invest with and the right opportunity. Thank you.
And Hamza, we started with you, so I think it's just appropriate and symmetrical that we end with your words. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think some great conversations. The key is going to be execution. But at a personal level, I would love to find a reason to come to Botswana, do something very meaningful, and equally build something on the sort of global branded side. I see huge opportunity of what that can do for Botswana. And I think under the right sets of conditions, and if the will is there, then I think those opportunities will be definitely something we would consider as a regional player and investor.
Hamza, Sam, Kim, Ambassador Petra, thank you very, very much for your time, sharing your experience and your ideas. I think that the session was informative from this perspective. We've addressed many of the issues that we see as investors and operators in the country. Thank you very much.